The clothes on your back, the peaches in your grocery cart, maybe even the car you drive, almost certainly arrived here by ship. Thousands of vessels traverse the globe every day, but they are largely out of sight and therefore out of our minds. Our next guests want to draw attention to that. So, joining us now in Leeds, UK, Rose George. She's the author of 90% of Everything. In London, UK, Peter Hinchliff. That's Peter on the left, and he is the Secretary General with the International Chamber of Shipping. Also in London, although he's Canadian, Peter LaHaye, the Canadian National Coordinator with the International Transport Workers Federation. And in Harpenden, UK, via Skype, Julian Parker, the Chairman of the Maritime Foundation. And it's great to have you all on our program tonight on a subject that I confess, in the 8 years that we've done this program, I'm not sure we've ever done before. So it's long overdue, and we're happy to have this conversation tonight. I want to start, and perhaps Julian Parker, you can get us going for starters here. I'd like to find out how you were all first introduced to working on the water.
Well, it's a good question, and I think it was the books of Arthur Ransom that got me hooked. My uncle also had a boat on Lake Windermere, and there was a lot of interest in seafaring in those days when I went to sea in the 1950s, and it seemed a logical thing to do. I have to say it's partly fantasy because you don't know what it is like, but it seemed like a very attractive career in those days.
Peter Hinchliff, how about you?
Well, at the age of 18 months, my parents moved from UK to South Africa to work, and I did my first sea passage, and then later on I lived in a port area. So ships were always in my life, and at the age of 8 I thought, right, that's it. That's what I'm going to do, and I did it. Smitten
from childhood. Okay, Peter LaHaye, how about you?
Similarly, I grew up on the coast of British Columbia, Vancouver and Burnaby, and we would take vacations and trips over to Vancouver Island on the BC ferries, and my dad worked on the ferries. And so since I was a child, I thought that'd be a career for me, and I always wanted to work on ships going internationally.
Now, Rose, your career is associated with the water, but a little differently, in as much as you write about the water. Where does the fascination come from?
Well, I'm a little different in that I grew up 60 miles from the coast, but I have a very unmaritime childhood. And although my mother assures me we used to go to the beach quite a lot when I was little, but I actually grew up not knowing any working seafarer, not having learnt to sail. So the first real experience I had, apart from taking cross-channel ferries, was in 1999 when I went to sea on a container ship, and after that I was fascinated.
Do you know how to sail yet?
No.
I think one of the other 3 guests on this program may want to give you some lessons when this is done. Peter LaHaye, tell me this. What was it about the sea in particular that made you want to make it your life's work? Never mind how you were introduced to it. What was it that made you want to do it for a living for your whole career?
Well, I think initially it was the sense of adventure. I had an active mind in school. I had a hard time sometimes concentrating on stationary objects, and I was just fascinated by the world. I was a great avid reader, and would read everything I could about history and geography. Probably my 2 favorite subjects, and I just wanted to go out and explore.
And Peter Hinchliff, why make a living this way?
I think it was the romance as a young schoolboy, reading a lot of books about ships. I too was heavily into sailing of dinghies from the age of about 12, and I just could conceive of nothing else I wanted to do. It was a total absorption for me.
Julian Parker?
Well, yeah, it's much the same thing. I went to a naval college. Well, it was called a naval college, but it was preparing a merchant seaman as well. And so I got a very good grounding there. And it just seemed a natural progression for a long time. And then as you became sort of more senior and you found out more about what it was all about, it became more and more fascinating. So it's a wonderful industry. It goes on, and it's got international proportions and things of this sort. And all the places we used to visit in those days, we had much more time ashore. It was really a fascinating life. And so, yes, very wedded to it.
And Rose, you've already told us you didn't grow up in a seafaring family and you still don't know how to sail. So why the need to write the book that you wrote?
Because I found myself at the age of 40 realizing that I knew very little about 7/10 of the Earth's surface, which is the ocean, and I knew very little about it as a place of work and industry. And I remembered that trip I took in 1999, which was just a 10-day trip, but it was across the Atlantic in the middle of winter, and it was pretty memorable. And I just thought, I really want to go back to sea. And so I did. And unlike the two Peters and Julian, it has not been my life being at sea or seafaring, but it's consumed my life for the last 4 or 5 years, and I'm very glad it has.
Well, I guess you refer to something that they now call sea blindness, where we really don't know that much about what goes on the seas and don't think about it very much. And lest we needed any proof of this, Julian's Maritime Foundation took its cameras to the streets of the UK, and, well, the results were somewhat amusing. Let's play a clip of this, and then we'll come back and chat. Roll tape, please.
This is Southampton, a preeminent port city, if ever there was one. It's made its living from the sea for centuries. Even now, it's still a liner town as the great cruise ships dock here to take their customers off for a hedonistic fortnight on oceans far and near. You would think, wouldn't you, that if ever there was a place where the importance of the sea would be fully understood, it might be here. You'd be wrong.
How much of everything we use in the UK comes by sea? Is it 20%, 50%, 75%? How much do you think?
I'd probably say about 50%.
Would you be surprised if I said it was 95%?
Yeah, really, I would.
40%.
62%.
It's actually 95%.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Crikey.
Pass. 35%?
It's actually 95%.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
So, Julian, everybody is shocked when they find out that it is as high as 90 or 95%. And I wonder if you could help us understand why you think shipping is no longer in the public's consciousness in a way that it surely must have been half a century or a century ago.
Well, I think it largely comes down to the prevailing culture. We had a very, very large shipbuilding industry, and as you know, Britain probably had the largest merchant fleet in the world, and this ran on till about the 1950s. We had all these relatively small ships taking a lot of dock time, employing an enormous number of dockers, and this whole industry was a major employer of personnel. And when you add the Royal Navy and all the personnel associated with that, shipping was shipping and sea-related activities was one of the major industries of Britain. Shipbuilding, I'm sorry to say, moved out to the Far East, the heavy industries. Shipping, ship owning during the oil war, the Yom Kippur War, and the sudden increase in oil prices brought a shuddering halt to ship owning in Britain. And the dock industry has modernized and changed due to containerization. And of course, the Royal Navy has diminished as well as a result of the peace dividend after the Second World War. And so there was a lot of diminishing interest in the sea, if you like. There just weren't the opportunities in any of the old companies that were there before. And it's taking a long time to come back. And yet the international shipping industry has been supplying Great Britain, as you've heard in that film, with 90% of all its imports and exports. So it is strange, but it's not the same homegrown industry that we used to have. And I think that's got a subtle a downward impact on the way that people think about employment. It's wrong now. There's plenty of opportunities in the maritime world, but I think that's had an effect.
Peter LaHaye, you're from British Columbia, which of course is right on the biggest ocean in the world. Do you have any reason to believe that if you took cameras to the streets of Vancouver or Victoria, you'd find different numbers?
Yeah, this time you would, actually, and that's because of the environmental concerns that are in the newspapers in Canada all the time right now. And it's about the extraction of Canada's natural resources and shipping them off to the furnaces of Asia, particularly India and China. So there's a lot of talk about shipping right now. And unfortunately, because we don't have a sophisticated version or view of shipping like we would have had in days gone by, like Julian is just describing, there's a lot of misconception out there about the safety and the security of shipping and those sorts of things. the industry has a lot of problems, there's no question about it, but there's a lot of really good things about this industry too. And Canada is a country that's dependent on shipping for its natural resources and its economic wealth, quite frankly. So I struggle with our perception, our sea blindness now, and thinking that we need to talk a lot more about the shipping industry so that people aren't afraid of it. Right? And I think that's kind of the way Canadians react right now. They think shipping, oh my God, it's bad, automatically. And there's not really any due consideration of the value that it brings to our communities and to our country.
Well, which is particularly ironic, since I wonder if you went into the streets and asked 100 people, do you know the name of the Prime Minister of Canada who was in the shipping business, who owned Canada Steamship Lines? How many people would be able to come up with the name Paul Martin? What do you think?
Yeah. Well, funny you should mention that. One of the reasons that the Canadians know that Paul Martin was a ship owner was because of a demonstration I actually organized in British Columbia when one of his ships was visiting and there was no Canadians working on it. So we organized a demonstration. At that time, he was the finance minister of Canada. He wasn't the prime minister yet. But it became a national hotline topic for quite a while. And I think it dogged his whole political career, to be honest with you.
Let's follow up on some of the numbers that you just referred to. And to do that, I want to read an excerpt from Rose George's book. Here we go. From 90% of everything. Trade carried by sea has grown fourfold since 1970 and is still growing. In 2011, the 360 commercial ports of the United States took in international goods worth $1.73 trillion. It makes more financial sense for Scottish cod to be sent 10,000 miles to China to be filleted than sent back to Scottish shops and restaurants than to pay Scottish filleters. If the containers of Maersk, a shipping company, alone were lined up, they would stretch 11,000 miles, or nearly halfway around the planet. A container ship travels the equivalent of 3/4 of the way to the moon and back in 1 year. Okay, Peter Hinchliffe, continue along this way. How profitable is shipping today?
Well, it's not particularly profitable, actually, despite this, the impressiveness of all the numbers, and they truly are impressive. But we are struggling with the situation of the global downturn, although I think we're starting to see some upturn now, which is very good news. Shipping is experiencing its own goal because we used an awful lot of cash during the very good years up until the downturn to place orders for a lot of ships. And so the problem we now have is that as the depression really bites, we have too many ships chasing too few cargoes, and that is causing, has a serious impact on the operation of ships. But again, I think that the light is at the end of the tunnel. I think we're now starting to see a genuine upturn in trade, and we're seeing increasing trade figures at last.
Rose, let me ask you about a line from your book where you describe the shipping industry as clubby, insular, and difficult. You think that's a fair characterization?
I think it's true, but I also think other things are true too. And actually, I expected writing my book, and I expected the publication of my book to be met with more hostility than it has been. And in fact, I have been welcomed by many people in the shipping industry. They have gone out of their way to help me. But it is a difficult industry to understand because it is extremely complex. And that's because because of the open registry or flags of convenience system that often allows corporate anonymity, which makes it difficult to often track ownership structures. But I think on a wider cultural note, I think that the shipping industry has done what it has done for the last 60 or 70 years since the Second World War, and done it very successfully, being phenomenally important to globalization, to our economy, underpins our economy, there's no question about that, but has been left to its own devices, really. It's gone out of sight and out of mind, as you say. But I think that the shipping industry has got used to not being regarded and not having to make its case or seek publicity or seek public approval. And in that way, it is a bit inward-looking, let's say. But I think it's getting better. I think there are some companies, I noticed in the quotes from your book, you had to put a bracket to say who Maersk was. And you put it's a shipping company. Now, Maersk is a huge shipping company. It astonishes me that it's not a household name like Microsoft is, because Microsoft makes the software that is on our computers. Maersk brings us those computers. Their revenues are equivalent, about $60 billion a year, and yet we've not heard of Maersk. We've all heard of Microsoft. So I think there's something, I think the shipping industry is learning to convey what an interesting, if a little tricky, industry it is.
It's interesting you call it the way you call it, because I've always thought the pronunciation was the way I said it, but I guess I've always heard it or said it incorrectly, and have to confess that had I not seen that Robert Redford movie a month ago in which he's alone at sea, shipwrecked, and a Maersk container ship went right by him and didn't rescue him, I'm not sure I would have heard of the company either. Says a lot about the sea blindness, I guess, that we're talking about here today. Where do, Julian Parker, where do most seafarers come from nowadays?
Well, most of the seafarers definitely come from the Philippines. It's the largest supplier country. India was a major supplier, but they're actually finding it more and more difficult to get seafarers to go to sea. When the Soviet Union started to disintegrate, so to speak, a lot of Russian seafarers were available. Croatia from the old Soviet Republic, and there are, of course, obviously Chinese and other countries as well, but relatively few from the United Kingdom, relatively few from you in Canada. The more developed countries don't have so many seafarers operating at sea. So, yeah, no, the Philippines is #1 at the moment.
I'd like to get both Peters to comment on this, and that is in Rose George's book, she quotes a sea chaplain who says, quote, "People get outraged about sweatshops, but they don't realize that once the stuff is loaded on a ship, that can be another sweatshop." First to Peter Hinchliff, do you think seafarers are taken advantage of by the industry?
I don't think they're taken advantage of. I think seafaring provides a very useful working life for people who perhaps wouldn't have that opportunity. And the standards of working conditions and pay and so on, in terms of the normal expectations in those supplier countries, are actually very good. But I'm not defending those companies who operate below the benchmark that we like to set. Well, I think Rose George has done a brilliant job in her book of identifying that generally the industry provides an extremely good working life. But unfortunately, like in most industries, there are people who operate below the benchmark, and it's certainly our role to try and make sure that we create conditions where those operators simply can't operate.
Peter LaHaye, your view?
Yeah, I agree with a large part of what Peter said, but where we get stuck in really is in our role is defending the seafarers' interests and their rights, and when they call us that they've been mistreated, abused in all kinds of ways, denied medical attention, short on food, clean water. These are common complaints that we get. Repatriation, lots of these crew they sign a 9-month contract, for example, from the Philippines. They'll sign a 9-month contract, and they're on board those ships now for 12 months, 14 months, because certain ship owners are trying to save money in deployment costs. We used to set a goal in Vancouver of collecting $1 million in back wages a year for seafarers who have been cheated, outright ripped off by the bottom end of the shipping market. And there's nobody going to defend them. In fact, the ILO, the International Labour Organization, has described seafarers as in need of special protection and amongst the most marginalized and isolated workers in the world. And now we're moving towards greater regulatory assurance to defend seafarers' rights. In the ITF side, we've pretty much had to go it alone for many, many years. We're criticized for the work that we do because we're labor. You know, so unions always take a good kicking. There's no question about it in the public. But we have been defending those workers and setting things right for like 50 years now. And every year we collect about $30 million around the world in back wages and just do countless other things of pulling seafarers out of peril. So, you know, we've just in the last 2 years, I've just done some calculations for the last 2 years' performance of our 3 ITF inspectors in Canada. In the last 2 years, we've collected over $1 million, and we've been up and down the gangways of nearly 500 ships, and have been stuck in on abandonment cases, repatriation cases, physical and mental abuse, cheated of wages.
Well,
all
it gets
kinds of
worse than
things.
that, actually, Peter. I think I read somewhere in Rose's book that seafarer fatalities are 10 times those of land-based occupations, and seafarers, of course, abandoned by their employers as well. I want to read another excerpt from her book as follows. The high-risk area is 2,200 by 1,800 nautical miles. It includes the IRTC, the Internationally Recommended Transit Corridor, and also the routes of 70% of global oil traffic and 50% of container ships. Of these, fewer than 2% are successfully hijacked. We're talking about 21st century swashbucklers here. 544 seafarers were taken hostage in the first 6 months of 2010, with 360 still being held. 13 ships hijacked. 67 hostages died between 2007 and 2010. In 2010, Harvard Business School chose Somali piracy as the best business model of the year. Rose, to what extent do you think pirates still pose a significant danger to seafarers?
The piracy will always pose a significant danger to seafarers. The question is how we control it. And the good news is that at the moment, certainly in the waters of the Indian Ocean, piracy is being contained at the moment. I think, perhaps the other guests will disagree with me, but I think that's largely because many ships are now carrying armed guards, and pirates are not stupid. They don't particularly want to die. So if they're shot at, they will retreat. However, there have been attacks recently in the last month or so. There have been attempted attacks still on ships traveling through the Indian Ocean. And that just goes to show that as long as you have a state like Somalia, which, although it is improving, is still pretty comprehensively wrecked, enormous levels of poverty, young men ready to go out in small, fast boats and try their luck. There is piracy off West Africa now. There is piracy, a little bit of piracy still in the Malacca Strait. Piracy is an age-old activity, and it will always exist. What infuriates me is that for many years, and even now, piracy is not taken seriously. It's, you use the word swashbucklers. Now, these guys are not swashbucklers, they're criminals. They torture seafarers, they treat them appallingly, and yet you have International Talk Like a Pirate Day, or you have, kids dressing up as comedy pirates. I understand why, they're cartoon characters, but I think we have lost sight of the fact that these are criminals, and they're murderers, some of them. And hopefully the Captain Phillips film that came out recently gives some sense of what a brutal activity modern-day piracy is, and that seafarers, even now, there are 60 to 70 seafarers being held hostage for doing nothing more than doing their daily job.
This is the Tom Hanks movie is the one you just referred to. Peter Hinchliffe, do you think Rose has accurately characterized the situation?
Well, I endorse what she says. There is a lot of what is loosely called piracy all around the world, with the main focus being off the coast of Somalia and in the Gulf of Guinea. But a lot of the more widespread activity is really petty crime, and there are some armed attacks to do with petty crime. And all of it, of course, is utterly deplorable. But I do want to go back to the Somali situation. The reason, and I think Rose exactly got the right word, this is a situation which is being contained at the moment. It's certainly not solved. There are a number of very structured reasons why it is being contained. The industry itself has produced guidance which has been very widely adopted on passive defence of merchant ships. And that has made a huge difference to awareness among seafarers and to physical protection of the ships. Rose is right, there has been a resort to armed guards in the last couple of years, and undoubtedly that has provided a very effective deterrent against piracy attacks. The governments have been very clearly engaged, and there is a lot of military deployment of warships out to the Indian Ocean off the coast of Somalia. And I think having a couple of grey warships visible from the beach in Somalia is a very powerful message. And the fourth one that doesn't get much advertising is that there's a lot of capacity building activity funded by Western governments going on inside Somalia. And it is fundamentally, we will not solve this problem until we have enabled Somalia to be an effective working government and offered alternative careers to Somalis who perhaps at the moment don't have anything to turn to other than some kind of criminal activity. And that is where the success is going to come from, I think. But the real message is we as an industry have to keep our guard up. The seafarers have got to keep their awareness up so that we don't have any kind of complacency. And we need continuing government engagement. And without that government engagement, we're just not simply going to be able to reach a proper solution to this problem.
And Julian Parker, how would you rate the level of government engagement in, for example, nation building or making sure that there are those alternatives that Peter just referred to in places such as Somalia?
Well, it's certainly moving, but it's been very slow. And we have to go through these horrendous hijacks which have been taking place. But gradually, I think there is government consensus. The United Nations have been rather shocked when a ship carrying aid down to Uganda was hijacked. And of course, this was a ship on charter, which actually had an American crew. And this brought America into the situation for the first time. And they weren't so interested until they were involved. And I think now, gradually, everybody's starting to realize that these huge container ships, tankers and so on, they're carrying cargoes which affect everybody. And I think it's absolutely vital that United Nations and the associated countries that go with it take a very strong view on piracy. It's totally unacceptable. The whole of the ocean economy, so to speak, is affected by their actions. And I agree with Peter, of course, that ultimately it has to be solved on land. But in between times, we want to be having a very strong message and a strong message that we're going to protect the seafarers who are taking these, but are in effect international ships because they're full of international cargo for different ports, different countries, run by different people of different nations. It really is a UN matter to get to grips with this. And I have been a little bit disappointed, I have to say, with their response up to now. But I think I agree with Peter. We are getting on top of it. We are starting to get the country infrastructure better in shape. And things are looking a lot better than they were even 3 years ago.
Okay, we've got about 6-7 minutes left here, and I want to put a couple of more items on the table before our time is out. And Rose George, let me start with you on this one. We need to talk about the environment. And I want you to tell us, based on what you learned, how environmentally friendly do you think shipping is in the main today?
Shipping is unquestionably the most environmentally friendly method of mass transport. If you compare it to trucks or aviation, it is much, much, much greener. It's more economical, it's more environmentally efficient. That said, it's not benign, and nobody in shipping can deny that it has an impact. It has a big environmental impact. Shipping emissions are around 4%. There's a lot of debate about that, but that's depending on which side of the debate you're on, is up around the same as aviation. That's because there's a huge shipping fleet bringing us everything we need every single day of the year. And so, of course, it has an environmental impact. Now, when I went to sea on my container ship, and I would go out on deck in the high seas, and I would look up at the funnel, and this horrible black smoke would come out. And that's because ships burn something called bunker fuel. And they burn bunker fuel because it's cheap, understandably. But it's very horrible stuff. Now, I think the shipping industry in the last couple of years has definitely made progress. And now you hear lots of talk about sustainable shipping, much green shipping. And there is an interesting trying to improve these emissions and trying to improve things like acoustic pollution, which is another problem, which is caused by very inefficient propellers underwater. And I think Peter Hinchcliffe will agree with me. I think there is much more movement now and much more attention being paid to the environmental impact of shipping.
Well, let's find out. Peter Hinchcliffe, how would you rate the move to so-called greener shipping nowadays?
Well, I think shipping has been evolving towards a green industry for a very long time, actually. What is being put in place now is regulation which is giving us the benchmark that I was talking about before. I think just to concentrate perhaps on two issues, and a rather trite statistic, but you were very keen on the 95% of transport work being done by shipping at the beginning of this programme. And I would add to that, 95% of transport work is done for an environmental cost of 3% of the global CO2 inventory. That is quite a compelling figure, actually. But I don't disagree at all with Rose when she says shipping can do better, and we're working on that. She mentions the use of heavy fuel oil as the propulsive fuel. There is now regulation in place which means that by 2020, the entire world's fleet of about 80-odd thousand ships will be stopped from using heavy fuel oil and will start burning distillate, or essentially diesel fuel, which is hugely cleaner. It's also, perhaps I should add, about twice as expensive. But the point I'm making is that there are these regulations which we fully support as an owners organisation in order to create a benchmark which in turn is moving forward the environmental performance of shipping. And Rose has identified other areas like radiator noise into the water. I think we'll probably see some form of regulation on that in the not too distant future.
Julian Parker, it's one thing if you're bringing from the Far East clothing and your ship has a leak. It's a different thing if you're carrying oil from, let's say, New Orleans or something like that, and that's a bigger problem. Would you agree that there's still an issue around public relations as it relates to shipping oil around the world?
Yes, yes, there is, and it's largely a question of perception. It is extraordinary. I used to be chairman. I just retired as chairman of the Green Award in Rotterdam, and that's an environmental inspection organisation, and we inspect, I suppose, most of the world's large tankers as part of the process. But let me say that in 1970, when I started in the Nautical Institute, there was something like 300 major oil spills of 700 tons. And the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization was pointing out in a speech the other day that last year there were only 1.7 incidents. So that is an enormous improvement. And the other thing is that shipping, the tanker industry during that period has grown by about 30%. So if you look at the number of incidents that occurred in 1970, you put 30% onto it, and now you've just got 1.5 major incidents a year occurring. You see what a huge improvement it's been. But for the observer on the television, unfortunately, the observer on the television sees the whole screen and gets the impression that the whole industry is rather inclined to spill oil on the water. And you can't avoid that. It's the impression you get. It's the perception. Unfortunately, it is absolutely wrong. I agree with Peter. There's a steady improvement in all the different fields. I think you've got crayfish being blocked going up into the big lakes in Canada now, and they probably came in on ships in the distant past. The ballast water's changed at sea now, and that process is under control as well. So yes, I think things are moving in the right direction.
Peter Leahy, I'm literally down to my last minute, and I want to give it to you to talk about what you think can be done to make Canadians less sea blind.
Well, that's a good question. I guess programs like this are a good place to start. More environmental awareness of shipping and its benefits, and everybody standing up and facing together what are the criticisms, and really just an openness. You know, we're just talking about the environmental components. It's absolutely true that ships are losing less oil in accidents now, but many ships are still pumping it out of their bilges because there aren't any solutions for transferring the oil ashore. You know, oily water bilges and things like that. So, you know, I mean, we got to be honest. We got to work together. Peter Hinchcliffe's organization and ours are working together at the International Labour Organization, the International Maritime Organization. The more we get together, the more we, you know, get rid of the bad operators, so to speak. I think that will bring up the image of shipping and improve the perception in the public.
Okay. Peter, don't take this the wrong way, but we did a program on accents not too long ago here on TVO, and that British accent that we heard throughout so much of tonight's broadcast, Peter Leahy being the exception, is really fabulous. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Rose George, the author of 90% of Everything, on Skype from Leeds, UK. Peter LaHaye, the Canadian National Coordinator of International Transport Workers Federation in London. Peter Hinchliffe, the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Shipping, also in London, UK. And Julian Parker, the Chairman of the Maritime Foundation. Good of all of you to join us on TVO tonight. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.